names in English history carry the weight and recognition of Henry VIII. His story has captivated audiences for centuries, appearing in theatrical productions since the days of the Bard himself, reimagined countless times in contemporary cinema, television series, and works of fiction. The popular imagination knows him primarily through two lenses: his notorious succession of 6 marriages and his dramatic rupture with the Catholic Church that led to the founding of the Church of England. Yet beneath these headlines lies a far more complex figure. What kind of man was Henry when the crown was removed and the royal robes set aside? Does he truly deserve the dark reputation that history has assigned him? And in what ways did his decisions reshape not just England, but the entire trajectory of Western civilization? Tonight, we'll explore these questions together. So settle into a comfortable position, allow your breathing to slow, and let your mind drift gently backward through time as we uncover the sleepy history of King Henry VIII. Picture, if you will, the first day of March in the year 1522. Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, serving as Lord High Chancellor of England, has opened his grand residence for a Shrovetide celebration unlike any other. The event combines the pageantry of medieval theater with the mystery and allure of a masquerade ball. While historians debate whether every detail of this evening unfolded exactly as recorded, the scene captures a pivotal moment that would alter the course of a nation. Imagine stepping into the great hall where candlelight flickers against stone walls hung with rich tapestries. In the center of this magnificent space stands an elaborate prop castle constructed specifically for this evening's theatrical performance. The air buzzes with excitement and anticipation as nobles in elaborate costumes prepare to act out their roles in this Tudor entertainment. Young gentlemen dressed in resplendent blue and gold satin move with purpose toward the castle structure, their mission to rescue 8 young ladies, each representing a particular virtue embroidered elegantly upon their headbands. These women, draped in flowing white satin gowns, bear names like Beauty, Mercy, Constancy, and Honor. They are guarded by other ladies representing the obstacles to virtue: jealousy, danger, disdain, and unkindness. The scene unfolds with all the drama of a romance tale. The gentlemen storm the castle with mock seriousness, their voices raised in playful challenge. The defending ladies protest with theatrical indignation. Laughter ripples through the assembled crowd. And then, in the midst of this elaborate performance, 2 pairs of eyes meet across the crowded hall. He knows her only by the virtue written on her headband: perseverance. As tradition dictates, he approaches to rescue her from the castle's confines, then leads her in a dance. The gathered nobles think nothing of it. After all, King Henry's wandering eye was common knowledge at court. Many a pretty face had caught his attention before, only to be forgotten within days or weeks. None of the witnesses to this seemingly innocent flirtation could possibly imagine that they were watching the beginning of an affair that would split a kingdom, defy a pope, and rewrite the religious landscape of an entire nation. The woman behind the mask of perseverance was Anne Boleyn, and Henry's infatuation with her would drive him to divorce Queen Catherine of Aragon, separate England from 1,000 years of Catholic tradition, and declare himself supreme head of a new Church of England. Whether we admire him or condemn him, there's no denying that Henry VIII carved his name deeply into the pages of history. Let us travel back further still to the final decade of the 15th century. On a warm summer day, the 28th of June in 1491, a child was born within the walls of Greenwich Palace. This infant was the second son of King Henry VII and his queen Elizabeth of York. The child's arrival was celebrated, though perhaps not with the same fervent joy that had greeted his older brother Arthur's birth. After all, Arthur was the heir, the future of the Tudor dynasty. This second son seemed destined for a supporting role in the grand theater of royal life. But destiny has a way of rewriting its own script. The boy was christened Henry, named for his father who had fought to claim the throne and unite the warring houses of York and Lancaster through his marriage. Young Henry's early years unfolded in the shadow of his brother's preparation for kingship. While Arthur received intensive training in statecraft and diplomacy, preparing for the weight of the crown he would one day wear, Henry's education followed a different path. Imagine the young prince in the schoolroom, surrounded by some of the finest minds that Renaissance Europe could provide. His tutors were men of exceptional learning, well-versed in the new humanist traditions flowing from Italy. They instructed him in classical languages, and Henry proved an apt pupil. By the time he reached adolescence, he could converse fluently in French and Latin, the languages of diplomacy and scholarship. His curriculum ranged widely. Political theory, poetry, music, theology, and mathematics all competed for space in his developing mind. The boy showed particular aptitude for music. His fingers learned to dance across the strings of various instruments, and his voice would later be praised throughout the courts of Europe. He studied the great philosophers and theologians, developing a genuine interest in religious doctrine that would, ironically, later enable him to justify his break with Rome. He learned to ride, to hunt, to joust, and to excel in all the physical pursuits expected of a nobleman. At the age of 10, young Henry participated in the ceremonies surrounding a momentous occasion, his brother's wedding. In November of 1501, 15-year-old Prince Arthur married the Spanish princess Catherine of Aragon, forging an alliance between England and one of Europe's most powerful kingdoms. The festivities lasted for days, filled with tournaments, feasts, and celebrations. Young Henry played his part in these ceremonies, likely never imagining that this Spanish princess would one day become his own wife. Tragedy, however, would soon reshape the trajectory of Henry's life. Just months after the wedding celebrations concluded, Prince Arthur fell ill. Despite the best efforts of royal physicians, the young prince died in April of 1502. The cause of his death remains disputed to this day, some suggesting it was the sweating sickness that periodically ravaged England, others proposing different ailments. What is certain is that his death devastated the royal family and fundamentally altered Henry's future. At 11 years old, Henry suddenly found himself heir to the throne. The titles that had belonged to Arthur, Prince of Wales and Earl of Chester, were now his. He had already accumulated an impressive collection of honors from an extraordinarily young age, but these new titles carried far greater weight and responsibility. Among Henry's earliest titles was one that would shape his self-image for the rest of his life, Knight of the Bath. The ceremony conferring this honor had taken place when Henry was merely 3 years old, and though he could hardly have understood its significance at the time, the ritual left a profound impression that would echo through his later years. Picture the scene: a small boy, barely out of infancy, placed carefully into a special bathtub while solemn officials read aloud the requirements and obligations of chivalric knighthood. The young prince couldn't possibly comprehend the complex code of honor being described, but the pageantry and gravity of the ceremony imprinted itself on his young mind. His father, King Henry VII, made the sign of the cross upon the child's shoulder with holy water, then spent the night in prayer, dressed in the simple robes of a hermit, seeking divine blessing for his son. When morning arrived, the 3-year-old prince was dressed in fine clothes and placed upon a horse. He was led into Westminster Hall, where nobles and courtiers gathered to witness the moment when King Henry VII dubbed his son a knight of the realm. The monarch raised a great sword, touched it first to one small shoulder, then the other. From that moment forward, young Henry considered himself a knight, bound by the ancient codes of chivalry. This self-image would persist throughout his life. Even when his actions contradicted every principle of chivalric honor, when he ordered the executions of wives and trusted advisors, when he seized church property and crushed rebellions with merciless efficiency, Henry still saw himself as that young knight, bound by ancient codes of honor and justice. The disconnect between self-image and reality would become one of the defining paradoxes of his reign. After Arthur's death, one might expect that King Henry VII would have accelerated his younger son's preparation for kingship. Instead, the father seemed determined to shield the boy from public responsibility. The reasons for this protective approach remain unclear. Perhaps the king, having already lost one heir, couldn't bear to expose his remaining son to the dangers and pressures of public life. Perhaps he hoped to maintain control of the kingdom for as long as possible. Or perhaps he simply failed to recognize that his son needed more thorough preparation for the role he would inevitably assume. Whatever the reason, when Henry eventually ascended to the throne, he lacked the years of careful grooming that Arthur had received. This gap in his preparation may have contributed to some of the impulsive and poorly considered decisions that would mark his reign. In the aftermath of Arthur's death, diplomatic considerations demanded attention. Catherine of Aragon, the young widow, found herself in an awkward position. She was a Spanish princess in a foreign land, her primary purpose for being in England, the alliance secured through marriage, suddenly uncertain. King Henry VII, ever the calculating statesman, saw an opportunity to maintain the valuable Spanish alliance while saving the considerable dowry that would need to be returned if Catherine left England. The solution proposed was straightforward: marry Catherine to the new heir, young Henry. There were, of course, complications. Catholic doctrine generally prohibited a man from marrying his brother's widow, though exceptions could be made with papal dispensation. Catherine insisted that her marriage to Arthur had never been consummated, which would remove the primary objection to a new union. Whether this was true became a matter of intense speculation and would later serve as the foundation for Henry's attempts to dissolve their marriage. In June of 1503, when Catherine was 18 and Henry only 12, the pair became betrothed. Their engagement would last 6 long years, marked by uncertainty and changing political winds. The young prince himself seemed ambivalent about the match. When he turned 14, he formally declared that he would not marry Catherine. The Spanish princess, meanwhile, grew increasingly convinced that God intended her to be Henry's wife and England's queen. She waited, lived frugally in her reduced circumstances, and prayed for a resolution. Everything changed in 1509. King Henry VIII died on the 21st of April, and his 17-year-old son ascended to the throne as Henry VIII. Within weeks, the young king announced his intention to honor what he claimed was his father's dying wish, that he marry Catherine of Aragon. On the 11th of June, just over 7 weeks after becoming king, Henry married the Spanish princess in a private ceremony. Catherine was by then 23 years old. Their joint coronation at Westminster Abbey on the 24th of June was a spectacular affair. Imagine the streets of London transformed for the occasion. Golden tapestries hanging from windows, catching the summer sunlight and creating rivers of light along the processional route. Crowds gathered dozens deep, pressing forward for a glimpse of their young king and his queen. The couple rode through the city on horseback, Henry resplendent in his youth and vigor, Catherine elegant and dignified in her Spanish finery. Jewels glittered on their clothes, catching and reflecting light with every movement. The air filled with cheers, the ringing of church bells, and the sound of trumpets announcing a new era. The young king approached his new role with energy and confidence. One of his first actions revealed a ruthlessness that would characterize his reign. A mere 2 days after his coronation, Henry ordered the arrest and execution of 2 nobles, Edmund Dudley and Richard Empson, who had served his father as tax collectors. The charges? High treason. The reality? These men had made themselves unpopular through their aggressive collection of royal revenues, and the young king saw an opportunity to curry favor with the nobility by removing them. It was a calculated political move disguised as justice. This pattern would repeat throughout Henry's reign. When someone stood in his way, or when removing them served his interests, Henry showed little hesitation in employing the ultimate sanction. While he occasionally demonstrated mercy, pardoning those who begged his forgiveness, his default position leaned heavily toward ruthlessness rather than clemency. The young king's ambitions extended beyond England's shores. Like many monarchs before him, Henry harbored romantic notions of military glory and territorial expansion. His eyes turned toward France, as English kings' eyes had turned for centuries. Since the 14th century, English monarchs had claimed the French throne as their own, a claim that had sparked the 100 Years' War and countless smaller conflicts. Henry VIII had maintained a complex relationship with France, sometimes adversarial, sometimes allied, always cautious. His son, blessed with the confidence and energy of youth, initially renewed these diplomatic bonds. The young king likely recognized that making an enemy of France, which had aligned itself with the Holy Roman Empire, would be strategically unwise. But diplomacy gave way to ambition. In 1511, Henry negotiated a treaty with Spain, forming an alliance with his father-in-law, King Ferdinand II. Under Ferdinand's influence, the young English king joined the Holy League, an anti-French coalition established by Pope Julius II. Plans took shape for a coordinated Anglo-Spanish assault, with Henry dreaming of recovering Aquitaine, the vast region in southwestern France that England had controlled centuries earlier. War was formally declared in 1512, 3 years into Henry's reign. The initial campaign proved disappointing from a military perspective. English forces landed in southwestern France, but achieved little of substance. The Spanish allies proved unreliable, more interested in their own objectives than in Henry's dreams of conquest. From a purely military standpoint, the expedition was considered a failure. Yet, diplomatically, Henry scored an unexpected victory. Through skillful negotiation and personal charisma, he convinced the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I to join the Pope's anti-French alliance. This was a significant achievement, and Pope Julius II, recognizing Henry's role in expanding the coalition, bestowed upon him the title Most Christian King. For a young monarch eager to establish his reputation on the European stage, this papal recognition was intoxicating. The following year brought the military success that Henry craved. In 1513, the king personally led an army across the Channel, determined to achieve the glory that had eluded him the previous year. His forces laid siege to Therouanne, a town in northern France. The English strategy was straightforward: surround the town, cut off supplies, and wait for hunger to force surrender.
Les Français cavalerie arrivaient au break le siège, mais des miscalculés leur approche. English archers, the legendary longbowmen who had won fame at Agincourt a century earlier, unleashed a devastator barrage. Les Français cavalerie, finding themselves under heavy fire and unable to close with the enemy, retreated at speed. English forces pursued, and the engagement entered history books as the Battle of the Spurs, a mocking reference to how quickly the French horsemen had spurred their mounts en retraite.
In the broader context of European warfare, the Battle of the Spurs was a relatively minor engagement. But Henry, understanding the power of propaganda, ensured that news of the victory spread throughout Europe, portrayed as a triumph of English military might. The young king basked in his newfound reputation as a warrior monarch. After capturing Tyrant, Henry presented the town to Emperor Maximilian as a gesture of alliance. The English forces then moved on to Tournai, a wealthy city in present-day Belgium. After a brief siege, the city surrendered and Henry claimed it for England. To cement English control, he ordered the construction of an enormous fortress. The citadel he built still stands today, a lasting monument to his brief moment of military glory. While Henry was campaigning in France, he had left England in the capable hands of his wife. This decision reveals the trust and confidence he placed in Catherine during the early years of their marriage. She was, after all, the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, monarchs who had united their kingdoms and driven the Moors from the Iberian Peninsula. Catherine had inherited her parents' political acumen and strength of character. Queen Catherine's mettle would be tested almost immediately. Scotland and France had maintained a formal alliance since the late 13th century, known as the Old Alliance. With England's king and his army occupied across the Channel, the Scottish king James IV saw an opportunity. Encouraged by the French monarch, who hoped to relieve pressure on his own kingdom by forcing England to fight on two fronts, James gathered his forces and invaded northern England in September of 1513. Catherine responded with decisive action. She coordinated England's defensive efforts and appointed Thomas Howard, Earl of Surrey, to command the English army. The two forces met at Flodden Field in Northumberland. The battle that followed would be the largest ever fought between England and Scotland, with estimates suggesting that each side fielded armies numbering in the tens of thousands. The English forces, fighting on familiar ground and well supplied, proved superior. The Scottish army was decisively defeated, and King James IV himself fell in battle, one of the last European monarchs to die in combat. The victory secured England's northern border and demonstrated that Queen Catherine was far more than a decorative consort. She had proven herself a capable regent and military commander. When Henry returned from France, flushed with his own victories, he found that his wife's achievement actually overshadowed his own. While he had won a minor engagement and captured a couple of towns, Catherine had commanded the defense that destroyed a Scottish army and killed their king. For a monarch obsessed with his own glory, this may have planted the first seeds of resentment. Henry's military ambitions gradually gave way to financial reality. Wars were extraordinarily expensive, and the English treasury was depleted. Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, who had risen to become the king's chief advisor and Lord Chancellor, presented an intriguing alternative path to glory. If Henry could not earn lasting fame through military conquest, perhaps he could achieve it as a bringer of peace, a wise monarch who elevated diplomacy above warfare. What followed was one of the most extravagant diplomatic events in European history. In June of 1520, Henry met with Francis I of France at a location near Calais, carefully chosen for its neutral position between English and French territory. The event would be remembered as the Field of Cloth of Gold, named for the golden fabric that featured prominently in the temporary structures erected for the occasion. An entire city conjured into existence for a single diplomatic summit. Hundreds of tents made from cloth of gold, a luxurious fabric woven with actual gold thread, gleaming in the summer sun. Fountains constructed for the occasion flowed not with water, but with wine, available freely to all attendees. An enormous yard was laid out for jousting and other martial competitions, allowing the nobility of both nations to display their prowess. The centerpiece was a temporary palace, designed and painted to mimic a permanent brick structure. Its interior was lavishly decorated with tapestries, fine furniture, and every luxury imaginable. For nearly 3 weeks, the English and French courts competed in a friendly but intense contest of conspicuous consumption, each trying to outdo the other in displays of wealth and magnificence. Henry and Francis, both young kings eager to establish their reputations, developed a complex relationship that mixed genuine camaraderie with intense rivalry. They competed in wrestling matches and jousting tournaments, with courtiers from both sides holding their breath whenever the two monarchs faced each other, terrified that an accidental injury might reignite hostilities. The Field of Cloth of Gold was a spectacular success in terms of public relations. Artists created paintings and tapestries commemorating the event, ensuring that news of its magnificence spread throughout Europe. The peace between England and France would last for 8 years, which was actually a considerable achievement given the long history of conflict between the two nations. Yet peace treaties, like temporary palaces, can be dismantled. The death of King Louis XII and the ascension of Francis I to the French throne had altered the dynamic between the two kingdoms. Francis was young, ambitious, and determined to assert French power in Europe. He saw Henry as both a potential ally and a rival for prestige and influence. This complicated relationship would continue to evolve throughout both their reigns. Beneath the pageantry and diplomatic triumphs, a crisis was slowly developing in Henry's personal life. For all the magnificence of his court and the power of his kingdom, the king lacked the one thing he needed most, a male heir. Queen Catherine had endured a succession of heartbreaking disappointments. She had suffered multiple miscarriages and stillbirths. In 1511, she gave birth to a son named Henry after his father. The king was ecstatic, ordering celebrations throughout London. But the infant died after only 52 days, and the king's joy turned to grief. Catherine would conceive again, but none of these pregnancies resulted in a living son. Only one child survived, Princess Mary, born in February of 1516. She was intelligent, well-educated, and beloved by both her parents. But she was not the son that Henry desperately wanted. In an age when female monarchs were extremely rare and often faced challenges to their authority, Henry worried about leaving his kingdom to a daughter. He feared that England might descend into civil war again, as it had during the Wars of the Roses before his father won the throne. In 1519, Henry's mistress, Elizabeth Blount, gave birth to a son. The king named the boy Henry Fitzroy, with Fitzroy being a surname traditionally given to royal bastards, literally meaning son of the king. While illegitimate, the boy was openly acknowledged and honored by Henry, who gave him noble titles, including the Duke of Richmond and Somerset. Had young Henry Fitzroy lived past 17, he might well have been legitimized and named as heir to the throne. It's important to understand that in Tudor England, a king having mistresses was hardly scandalous. Most nobles maintained relationships outside their marriages, and as long as discretion was observed and legitimate succession wasn't threatened, society largely turned a blind eye. Henry's various affairs raised few eyebrows at court. What did shock the court was the nature of Henry's relationship with Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn had spent several years at the French court, serving in the household of Queen Claude. There, she had absorbed the sophisticated culture, fashion, and manners of French nobility. When she returned to England around 1522, she brought with her an elegance and vivacity that set her apart from other ladies at court. Anne was not considered a conventional beauty by Tudor standards. Contemporary descriptions suggest she was slender, with dark hair and eyes, and a slightly olive complexion. But she possessed something more valuable than conventional prettiness: charisma. She was witty, educated, musically talented, and capable of captivating a room with her conversation. She could discuss theology, poetry, and politics with equal ease. It's likely that Henry first noticed Anne at the Shrovetide pageant hosted by Cardinal Wolsey in 1522, though historians debate whether their romance began immediately or developed over subsequent years. What is certain is that by the mid-1520s, Henry was obsessed with her. Anne's older sister, Mary Boleyn, had previously been the king's mistress, which made Henry's pursuit of Anne somewhat awkward. But Anne had observed what happened to royal mistresses. They were enjoyed briefly, showered with gifts, and then discarded when the king's interest waned. Mary had received some rewards for her time as royal mistress, but nothing that transformed her circumstances dramatically. Anne was determined not to follow her sister's path. When Henry made his intentions clear, she refused to become his mistress. This refusal only intensified the king's desire. Here was a woman who said no to him, a king accustomed to having every wish fulfilled. Her resistance became an intoxicating challenge. As the 1520s progressed, Henry became convinced that his marriage to Catherine was cursed.
He pointed to a passage in the biblical book of Leviticus that prohibited a man from marrying his brother's widow, warning that such a union would be childless. Henry interpreted Catherine's inability to give him living sons as proof that God disapproved of their marriage. The fact that they had a daughter seemed irrelevant to his interpretation. What mattered to Henry was the lack of a male heir. It's worth considering whether Henry genuinely believed this religious argument, or whether he cynically used it to justify a decision driven by his desire for Anne. The truth probably lies somewhere between these extremes. Henry was genuinely devout in his own way, and he had long conversations with theologians about the validity of his marriage. He wrote extensively on the subject, covering page after page with his arguments and biblical references. At the same time, his conclusions conveniently aligned with his romantic desires. In 1527, Henry approached Cardinal Wolsey with an extraordinary request. He wanted his marriage to Catherine annulled, not divorced, as divorce in the modern sense didn't exist in Catholic theology, but declared null and void, as if it had never validly existed in the first place. Wolsey recognized the complexity of the situation. Catherine was the aunt of Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, one of the most powerful men in Europe. Pope Clement VII, whose permission would be necessary for an annulment, was effectively under Charles's influence. The Pope was unlikely to risk offending the Emperor by declaring his aunt's marriage invalid. Nevertheless, Wolsey worked tirelessly on what became known as the King's Great Matter. He opened diplomatic channels, negotiated with Rome, and established a special ecclesiastical court in England to examine the case. Cardinal Lorenzo Campeggio was sent from Rome to participate in this court alongside Wolsey. The hearings began in 1529. Catherine appeared before the court and made an impassioned speech defending the validity of her marriage. She insisted that her brief marriage to Arthur had never been consummated, and therefore no impediment existed to her marriage to Henry. She reminded the court that she had been a faithful wife for 20 years. Then she appealed directly to Rome, refusing to accept the English court's jurisdiction. After months of deliberation, Campeggio refused to issue a verdict. He adjourned the court indefinitely, effectively kicking the decision back to Pope Clement VII. For Henry, who had expected a quick resolution in his favor, this was an intolerable delay.
Cardinal Wolsey, despite his years of faithful service, became the scapegoat for this failure. In October 1529, he was stripped of his office as Lord Chancellor and charged with praemunire, a crime that essentially meant exceeding his authority and subordinating royal power to papal power. All his property was confiscated, and he was banished from court. Wolsey died in November 1530, while traveling to London to face trial for treason. His final words reportedly expressed regret that he had not served God as diligently as he had served his king.
Wolsey's replacement as Lord Chancellor was Sir Thomas More, a brilliant scholar, lawyer, and devout Catholic. More was famous throughout Europe for his book Utopia and for his uncompromising religious principles. Henry may have hoped that More's reputation for integrity would lend credibility to his efforts to annul his marriage. If so, he badly misjudged his new chancellor. As the 1530s began, Henry grew increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress from Rome. He had banished Catherine from court, moving Anne Boleyn into the Queen's apartments. They appeared together at state functions, with Anne taking precedence over all other ladies. While not yet married, they were clearly presenting themselves as a royal couple.
Anne's influence on Henry during this period was significant. She introduced him to religious reformers and their ideas. For someone as well-read as Anne, the religious debates sweeping Europe were fascinating intellectual exercises. The Protestant Reformation, begun by Martin Luther in 1517, had challenged many traditional Catholic doctrines. Reformers argued for reading the Bible in common languages rather than Latin, for reducing the elaborate hierarchy of the Catholic Church, and for addressing corruption among the clergy. Anne owned books by Protestant reformers, which was somewhat dangerous in Catholic England. She argued that the church needed reform, that clergy should not accumulate vast wealth while common people suffered, and that individuals should have direct access to Scripture. These ideas aligned conveniently with Henry's growing conviction that he, not the Pope, should be the highest authority in England. Henry convened a council of scholars to study a fundamental question: did the Pope actually have legitimate authority over England, or was this authority a historical usurpation? The council, carefully selected to include men sympathetic to the king's position, studied historical documents and theological texts. Their conclusion, perhaps unsurprisingly, was that England had originally possessed an independent national church, and that papal authority represented a foreign intrusion on English sovereignty. Henry read through the council's findings meticulously, making marginal notes that survive to this day. With each page, his conviction grew that the Pope had no legitimate authority over England or its church. He commissioned a book titled The Glass of the Truth, which argued that English people should never accept rule by foreign powers. The papal authority was successfully reframed as a matter of national sovereignty and patriotic duty. Thomas Cromwell, a pragmatic and ruthless lawyer who had previously served Cardinal Wolsey, became Henry's chief minister. Cromwell understood how to translate the king's will into legislative action. Through a series of carefully crafted laws passed between 1532 and 1534, the English Parliament systematically severed England's ties with Rome. The Act in Restraint of Appeals, passed in 1533, prohibited any English subject from appealing to Rome on legal matters, including marriage. This meant that Henry's annulment could be decided entirely within England, with no possibility of Catherine appealing to the Pope. With this legal groundwork laid, Henry felt free to act. In late 1532, Henry and Anne traveled together to meet with King Francis I of France. Henry wanted to secure French support for his marriage to Anne, and Francis, seeing an opportunity to drive a wedge between England and the Holy Roman Empire, was happy to oblige. Shortly after returning to England, Henry and Anne were married in a secret ceremony. The exact date is disputed, but it was likely in late November or early December. Anne was already pregnant. A more formal, public wedding ceremony took place on January 25, 1533. By this point, Henry's new Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer, was in position to formally annul the marriage to Catherine. Cranmer had been a relatively minor church official before Anne Boleyn championed his appointment. He was a religious reformer who supported the king's cause. In May of 1533, Cranmer's ecclesiastical court declared that Henry's marriage to Catherine had never been valid. Catherine was stripped of her title as queen and would henceforth be known as the Dowager Princess of Wales, a title referencing her brief marriage to Arthur. On May 28, 1533, Cranmer declared Henry and Anne's marriage valid. Anne was crowned Queen of England on June 1, 1533, in a lavish ceremony at Westminster Abbey. 3 months later, on September 7, she gave birth to a daughter, Princess Elizabeth. Henry was disappointed that Anne had not given him the son he desperately wanted, but he assumed more children would follow. He couldn't have known that this infant daughter, born into controversy and later declared illegitimate, would one day become one of England's greatest monarchs. The Act of Succession, passed in 1534, declared that only Anne Boleyn's children could inherit the throne. Princess Mary was formally declared illegitimate and removed from the line of succession. Anyone who questioned the validity of Henry and Anne's marriage could be charged with treason. But the most significant legislation came with the Act of Supremacy, also passed in 1534. This act declared that the king was the only supreme head on earth of the Church of England. Not the Pope, but King Henry VIII held ultimate authority over the Church in England. He could appoint bishops, define doctrine, and settle theological disputes. He possessed power over both the temporal and spiritual lives of his subjects. For a country that had been Catholic for 1,000 years, this was a revolutionary change. The Pope had been understood as Christ's representative on earth, holding the keys to salvation itself. Defying the Pope meant risking one's immortal soul. Now Henry was asking, indeed commanding, his subjects to transfer their spiritual allegiance from the Pope to their king. Many people accepted this change, either out of genuine agreement with reformist ideas, pragmatic recognition of political reality, or fear of the consequences of resistance. But others could not reconcile this break with their conscience and faith. All who held public office, including clergy, were required to swear the oath of supremacy, recognizing Henry as head of the church. Refusal meant certain death for treason. 18 Carthusian monks were among the first to refuse. They were arrested, tried, and executed in brutal fashion, hanged until nearly dead, then cut down and disemboweled while still alive. This horrific punishment was meant to serve as a warning to others who might resist. Sir Thomas More, the former Lord Chancellor, who had resigned his office rather than support the annulment, was also arrested when he refused to take the oath. More was one of the most respected intellectuals in Europe. He had been Henry's friend for years. They had discussed theology together, shared meals, and engaged in the kind of deep conversation that Henry enjoyed with few others. But More's conscience would not permit him to deny papal authority or accept Anne Boleyn as the legitimate queen. He was tried for treason in July 1535. Even then, he tried to avoid directly contradicting the king, arguing that silence could not constitute treason. The court disagreed. More was found guilty and beheaded on July 6, 1535. His last words were reportedly a statement that he died, the king's good servant, but God's first. Henry's willingness to execute Thomas More demonstrated how far he would go to enforce his will. If even a loyal friend and former chancellor was not safe, then no one could feel secure in opposing the king. In 1535, Parliament passed the Suppression of Religious Houses Act. This marked the beginning of a campaign that would fundamentally transform the English landscape, the dissolution of the monasteries. Thomas Cromwell, as the king's chief minister, oversaw this project. Royal commissioners traveled throughout England, Wales, and Ireland, inspecting monasteries, convents, priories, and abbeys. These institutions had existed for centuries, serving as centers of learning, charity, and worship. They owned vast estates and possessed considerable wealth. Cromwell's commissioners compiled reports detailing the property and income of each religious house. In many cases, they also documented allegations of corruption, immorality, and deviation from religious rules. Whether these reports accurately reflected conditions or were exaggerated to justify the crown's actions remains a matter of historical debate. The smaller religious houses were targeted first. Monks and nuns were expelled from their communities. Some were given small pensions, others found themselves suddenly homeless. The buildings were often stripped of valuable materials, lead from roofs, stones from walls, precious objects from chapels. The crown sold the land and remaining structures to nobles and merchants, generating revenue for the royal treasury. Between 1536 and 1541, hundreds of religious houses were dissolved. Ancient monasteries that had stood for centuries were reduced to ruins. The wealth accumulated by these institutions over generations was transferred to the crown, and, through sales and grants, to the nobility and gentry who supported Henry's regime. This massive transfer of property had profound effects on English society. It created a new class of landowners whose wealth and position depended on the continuation of Henry's religious settlement. These people had a vested interest in preventing any restoration of Catholic authority, since such a restoration might require them to return the lands they had acquired. For many common people, the dissolution was devastating. monasteries had provided charity to the poor, medical care for the sick, and education for the young. With these institutions gone, social safety nets disappeared. The unemployed monks and nuns swelled the ranks of the displaced and impoverished. Opposition to these policies grew, particularly in the more traditionally Catholic regions of northern England. In October of 1536, rebellion erupted in Lincolnshire. The spark was a combination of grievances: the dissolution of monasteries, increased taxation, and fears about new religious policies. The uprising quickly spread to Yorkshire, where it gained leadership and organization. Robert Aske, a lawyer from Yorkshire, emerged as the primary leader. He gave the rebellion its name, the Pilgrimage of Grace. Aske and his followers framed their uprising not as rebellion against the king, but as a righteous crusade to save the church and advise the king against evil counselors who were leading him astray. They carried banners depicting the 5 wounds of Christ and wore badges showing the same imagery. The movement gained extraordinary momentum. Estimates suggest that 40,000 people or more joined the Pilgrimage of Grace. They occupied major towns, including Hull and York. The rebels were predominantly commoners, peasants, and townspeople, motivated by religious conviction and economic grievance. But they also included members of the northern nobility who sympathized with their cause. Thomas Howard, Duke of Norfolk, was dispatched to deal with the uprising. He led a royal army of perhaps 8,000 men. Facing a rebel force 5 times larger, Norfolk wisely chose negotiation over battle. He met with the rebel leaders and listened to their petition. The document presented to Norfolk contained 24 demands. The rebels wanted the monasteries restored, unpopular ministers removed, Princess Mary returned to the line of succession, and a guarantee that no reprisals would be taken against those who had participated in the Pilgrimage of Grace. They requested that a parliament be held in the north where their grievances could be properly heard. Norfolk made promises. He assured the rebels that their petition would be presented to the king. He offered a general pardon to all participants. He suggested that a northern parliament would be convened to address their concerns. Whether Norfolk genuinely intended to honor these promises or was simply buying time is unclear. What is certain is that he lacked the authority to make such commitments on the king's behalf. Robert Aske, trusting Norfolk's assurances, convinced his followers to disperse and return home. The massive rebel army melted away peacefully, but the promised parliament never materialized. When smaller uprisings occurred in early 1537, Henry saw an opportunity to break his promises without appearing entirely faithless. The king ordered the arrest of the pilgrimage's leaders, including Robert Aske. They were charged with treason. Aske was hanged in chains at York, left to die slowly as a public spectacle and warning. In total, approximately 216 people were executed in connection with the rebellion. Nobles who had supported the pilgrimage lost their estates and titles. Henry had successfully crushed the most serious uprising faced by any Tudor monarch. The brutal suppression demonstrated to anyone considering resistance that the king's mercy could not be relied upon. Opposition to royal policy became increasingly dangerous, driving dissent underground or into silence. While Henry was dealing with the Pilgrimage of Grace, his marriage to Anne Boleyn was deteriorating. The qualities that had attracted him to Anne, her wit, vivacity, and independent spirit, now irritated him. She was not the submissive wife he desired. She had opinions on policy and was not afraid to express them. She cultivated her own faction at court and involved herself in religious reform efforts. Most damaging of all, from Henry's perspective, was Anne's failure to give him a son. She had suffered 2 miscarriages after Elizabeth's birth. The second miscarriage of a male fetus occurred in January 1536. Anne reportedly went into premature labor after learning that Henry had suffered a jousting accident and feared he might be dead. When she delivered a dead baby boy, Henry interpreted this as yet another sign that his marriage was cursed. By early 1536, Henry's attention had already shifted to one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting, Jane Seymour. Jane was everything Anne was not: quiet, demure, submissive, and conventional. She represented a return to a more traditional model of queenship.
Thomas Cromwell, reading the political winds, began constructing a case against Anne. In April 1536, a court musician named Mark Smeaton was arrested and interrogated. Under pressure, possibly including torture, Smeaton confessed to adultery with the Queen. Based on this confession, Cromwell built a case that eventually implicated 5 men, including Anne's own brother, George Boleyn.
The charges were lurid and mostly implausible: adultery with multiple men, incest with her brother, and plotting to murder the king. The evidence was thin to non-existent. Much of the prosecution's case relied on circumstantial evidence, like Anne being alone with certain men or exchanging gifts. In Anne's case, such interactions were unavoidable. She was the queen, and courtiers constantly sought her attention and favor. On May 2, 1536, Anne was arrested at Greenwich Palace and taken to the Tower of London. The 5 accused men were also imprisoned. They were tried first, on May 12. 4 were found guilty and sentenced to death. Only one, Mark Smeaton, had confessed. The others maintained their innocence. All 5 were executed on May 17th. Anne's trial took place on May 15th before a court of peers. The proceedings were a foregone conclusion. She was accused of adultery with 5 men, incest, and treason. She defended herself with intelligence and dignity, refuting each charge, but the court had its orders. She was found guilty and sentenced to death. Even Archbishop Thomas Cranmer, whom Anne had helped elevate to his position, was unable or unwilling to save her. He did declare the king's marriage to Anne null and void, which created the logical absurdity that Anne was being executed for adultery in a marriage that had never been valid. Logic, however, was not the point. Henry wanted Anne removed, and the law bent itself to accommodate the king's will. Anne Boleyn was beheaded on May 19, 1536, on Tower Green. She made a final speech praising the king and asking for prayers for her soul. An expert swordsman had been brought from France specifically for the execution, ensuring that her death would be quick and relatively merciful compared to the usual method of beheading with an axe. Within days of Anne's execution, Henry was betrothed to Jane Seymour. They married on May 30, 1536, less than 2 weeks after Anne's death. Henry was 45, Jane about 28. The active succession was revised again. Princess Elizabeth, like her half-sister Mary before her, was declared illegitimate. Only children of Henry and Jane could legitimately inherit the throne. Jane gave Henry what he had longed for, a son. Prince Edward was born on October 12, 1537. The king's joy was boundless. He finally had a legitimate male heir. Celebrations were ordered throughout the kingdom. Church bells rang. Bonfires blazed. The future of the Tudor dynasty seemed secure. But joy turned to grief within days. Jane developed childbed fever, an infection common in an era before antibiotics. Despite the best efforts of the royal physicians, her condition worsened. She died on October 24, 1537, just 12 days after giving birth. Henry grieved genuinely for Jane. Of all his wives, she was the one he later asked to be buried beside. Whether their marriage would have remained happy had she lived is impossible to know. Henry's treatment of his other wives suggests that disillusionment would have eventually set in. But Jane's death preserved her memory in Henry's mind as the wife who had given him a son.
Thomas Cromwell, ever pragmatic, began searching for a new wife for the king. The choice had diplomatic implications. Henry needed allies against the threat posed by Catholic Europe, now that he had broken with Rome. Cromwell suggested Anne of Cleves, a German princess whose brother, the Duke of Cleves, ruled territories in the Holy Roman Empire but was sympathetic to religious reform. Negotiations proceeded. Hans Holbein the Younger, the court's official painter, was sent to Cleves to paint Anne's portrait. Based on this portrait and favorable reports from envoys, Henry agreed to the match. Anne arrived in England in December 1539, and Henry traveled to Rochester to meet his bride-to-be. The meeting was a disaster. Henry was reportedly disappointed by Anne's appearance in person. Whether she looked different from her portrait or whether Henry's expectations were simply unrealistic is unclear. What is certain is that the king felt trapped. The diplomatic arrangements had gone too far to be easily canceled without serious political consequences. Henry married Anne on January 6, 1540, but later claimed the marriage was never consummated. By June, he was seeking an annulment. Anne, understanding the dangerous position she was in, wisely cooperated. She agreed that the marriage had not been valid, citing a previous betrothal that had not been properly dissolved. The annulment was granted in July 1540. Anne of Cleves was treated far better than Henry's previous wives. She received the title of the king's beloved sister, was given substantial properties and an income, and remained in England for the rest of her life. She maintained friendly relations with Henry and with his daughters Mary and Elizabeth. She had escaped what might have been a far worse fate. Thomas Cromwell was less fortunate. His role in arranging the failed marriage to Anne of Cleves gave his enemies an opportunity to strike. He was arrested in June 1540, charged with treason and heresy. The exact nature of his supposed crimes was vague, but the outcome was predetermined. Cromwell was executed on July 28, 1540. On the same day that Cromwell was beheaded, Henry married his fifth wife, Catherine Howard. She was a cousin of Anne Boleyn and about 19 years old, while Henry was 49. The king, aging, obese, and increasingly unwell, was infatuated with his young bride. He showered her with gifts and attention, including estates confiscated from Cromwell. Catherine was vivacious and flirtatious, qualities that had charmed the king but would prove her downfall. Whether through genuine affection for another man or simple youthful indiscretion, Catherine became involved with Thomas Culpeper, a gentleman of the king's privy chamber and Henry's close friend. The affair was discovered in late 1541. Archbishop Cranmer presented evidence to the king, who initially refused to believe it. But the evidence was substantial, including love letters between Catherine and Culpeper. Under interrogation, both confessed to the relationship, though they denied it had been consummated. Additionally, evidence emerged that Catherine had been sexually involved with Francis Derham before her marriage to Henry. Catherine had not disclosed this previous relationship when she married the king, which could be interpreted as treason by fraud. Henry was devastated. This betrayal cut deeper than Anne Boleyn's alleged infidelities, perhaps because he had genuinely believed Catherine loved him. Both Culpeper and Derham were executed in December 1541. Catherine was beheaded on February 13, 1542. She was approximately 20 years old. Henry's sixth and final wife was Catherine Parr, a wealthy widow in her early 30s. They married on July 12, 1543. Catherine was intelligent, educated, and diplomatic. She served as a calming presence during Henry's final years and proved to be an excellent stepmother to his children. Catherine helped reconcile Henry with his daughters Mary and Elizabeth. Through her influence, the third act of succession was passed in 1543, which restored both daughters to the line of succession after their brother Edward, though without legitimizing them. Catherine was herself a religious reformer and published several books, becoming the first English queen to publish under her own name. Her religious views were more Protestant than Henry's,
and at one point, she nearly faced arrest for heresy. She skillfully diffused the situation by deferring to the king's superior knowledge, and Henry forgave her. As Queen Regent, Catherine governed England while Henry was fighting in France in 1544. Like Catherine of Aragon before her, she proved herself capable of handling the responsibilities of rulership. The Battle of Solway Moss in November 1542 resulted in an English victory over Scottish forces. King James V of Scotland died shortly afterward, leaving his infant daughter Mary as queen. Henry attempted to arrange a marriage between young Mary and his son Edward, hoping to unite the kingdoms peacefully. When Scotland rejected this plan, hostilities continued in what became known as the Rough Wooing. In 1544, Henry personally led an invasion of France, laying siege to Boulogne. Despite his poor health, he insisted on taking command of the army. Boulogne surrendered in September 1544, giving Henry a final military victory. But wars had left both England and France nearly bankrupt. When France attempted an invasion of England in 1545, their massive fleet was defeated, partly due to superior English gunnery and partly due to weather. The French flagship, the Mary Rose, sank in the Solent, taking hundreds of men with her. With both nations exhausted, peace was negotiated. The Treaty of Camp in 1546 ended the war. England kept Boulogne for 8 years, after which it would be returned to France. It was a face-saving measure, but hardly the glorious conquest Henry had dreamed of in his youth. By this time, Henry was a physical wreck. A jousting injury sustained in 1536 had never properly healed, leading to painful ulcers on his leg. He had become massively obese, with his waist measuring over 50 inches. He could barely walk and required mechanical assistance to move around his palaces. His temper grew increasingly volatile, and his judgment became erratic. Various theories have been proposed for Henry's physical and mental decline: diabetes, syphilis, thyroid problems, or brain damage from repeated jousting injuries. Whatever the medical cause, the effect was clear. The athletic young man who had dazzled courts with his physical prowess had become an invalid who terrified his courtiers with his unpredictable rages. Henry VIII died in the early hours of January 28, 1547, at the Palace of Whitehall. He was 55 years old. The official cause of death was likely a combination of renal and liver failure, possibly complicated by sepsis from his infected leg ulcers. He was buried at Windsor Castle in St. George's Chapel, next to Jane Seymour, the wife he had always considered his true queen because she had given him a son. His tomb, which he had planned to be the most magnificent royal monument ever constructed, was never completed. Henry's will confirmed his children's order of succession, first Edward, then Mary, then Elizabeth. He also made provisions for alternative heirs from the families of his sisters, carefully excluding the descendants of his older sister Margaret, who had married into the Scottish royal family. Henry never gave up his suspicion of the Scots. 9-year-old Edward VI succeeded to the throne under a regency council. The young king was intelligent and well-educated, showing promise as a ruler, but he had inherited his mother's fragile health. Despite the council's efforts to govern wisely, religious conflicts intensified. Edward, raised as a Protestant, pushed England further toward Protestantism than his father had ever intended. Edward VI died in 1553 at age 15, possibly of tuberculosis. His death triggered a brief succession crisis. An attempt to place Lady Jane Grey, a Protestant great-granddaughter of Henry VII, on the throne failed after just 9 days. The people of England rallied to Mary, Henry's older daughter, as the legitimate heir. Mary reigned from 1553 to 1558, A devout Catholic like her mother, she attempted to reverse the English Reformation and restore papal authority. Her reign became notorious for the persecution of Protestants, earning her the nickname Bloody Mary. Approximately 280 people were burned at the stake for heresy during her 5-year reign.
When Mary died in 1558, Elizabeth, the daughter of Anne Boleyn, became queen. Elizabeth I would reign for 45 years, presiding over a golden age of English culture and power. She carefully navigated between Catholic and Protestant extremes, establishing a moderate Anglican church that would endure. She never married, maintaining her independence and using the possibility of marriage as a diplomatic tool.
The Virgin Queen, as Elizabeth became known, proved to be one of England's greatest monarchs. Under her rule, England defeated the Spanish Armada, explored the New World, and saw the flourishing of literature and drama, including the works of William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe. Henry VIII's legacy is deeply contradictory, reflecting the complexity of the man himself and the turbulent era he shaped. He remains one of England's most famous monarchs, instantly recognizable in portraits by Hans Holbein, a broad-shouldered figure in magnificent clothing, legs planted wide, staring confidently at the viewer with an expression that brooks no contradiction. On one hand, Henry was a genuine Renaissance prince. He was highly educated, fluent in multiple languages, accomplished in music and poetry, and genuinely interested in theological debates. He was charismatic and could be generous to those who pleased him. His court attracted scholars and artists from across Europe. On the other hand, he was capable of breathtaking cruelty. He executed 2 of his 6 wives, both on questionable grounds. He ordered the deaths of trusted advisors like Thomas More and Thomas Cromwell when they no longer served his purposes. He dissolved centuries-old religious institutions and crushed rebellions with brutal efficiency. He claimed to be a defender of Catholic orthodoxy, even as he broke with Rome and executed Catholics who remained loyal to the Pope. He claimed to follow the codes of chivalry, even as he betrayed his word repeatedly. He believed himself to be specially chosen by God, even as he pursued his own desires regardless of moral cost. Perhaps most paradoxically, the king who was obsessed with producing a male heir and who tore his kingdom apart in pursuit of this goal, ultimately secured his dynasty's greatest success through a daughter he had declared illegitimate. Elizabeth I, the child of the scandalous marriage to Anne Boleyn, would prove to be the monarch who brought stability, prosperity, and glory to England. The religious transformation Henry initiated had consequences that extended far beyond his reign. The Church of England he established would become the foundation of worldwide Anglicanism. The break with Rome contributed to centuries of religious conflict, including civil wars in England and the persecution of both Catholics and Protestant dissenters. The dissolution of the monasteries fundamentally altered English society and the distribution of wealth and land. Henry's reign marked a crucial turning point in the development of royal power. By declaring himself supreme head of the church, he claimed an authority that exceeded that of any previous English monarch. Yet paradoxically, by working through Parliament to enact his religious reforms, he established precedents that would eventually limit royal power and strengthen parliamentary authority. In personal terms, Henry's life reads like a tragedy. The confident, athletic young man full of promise gradually transformed into a paranoid, obese tyrant. His desperate quest for a son led him to destroy lives, including those of women he had once loved. His inability to accept criticism or contradiction created a climate of fear at his court, where even the most powerful could suddenly fall from favor. Yet he also loved music and poetry. He enjoyed intellectual conversation. He took genuine pride in his children. He could show mercy as well as cruelty. He was, in the end, a human being of extraordinary complexity, capable of both remarkable achievements and terrible crimes. As you drift towards sleep, perhaps you might reflect on these contradictions. Henry VIII lived in a world very different from ours, operating under assumptions about royal power, religious authority, and personal honor that feel foreign to modern minds. Yet some aspects of his story remain timeless. The danger of power without accountability, the tragedy of obsession, and the unpredictability of legacy. The young knight who promised at age 3 to uphold chivalric honor became a king who bent every principle to his will. The devoted Catholic who published defenses of papal authority became the monarch who broke with Rome. The man desperate for a son left his greatest legacy through a daughter. Perhaps history's judgment on Henry VIII must remain as complicated as the man himself. Neither purely villain nor hero, but a towering figure whose actions shaped centuries of history, for better and for worse. A king who changed England forever, though not always in the ways he intended. The music plays on, carrying us gently away from the tumult of the Tudor court, back to the present moment, to the quiet comfort of our own time. Henry VIII and his world fade into the past where they belong, leaving behind only stories, portraits, and the echoes of decisions made centuries ago. Rest now, and let these tales of kings and queens, of ambition and consequence, of love and betrayal, drift away like morning mist. The past has its lessons, but it need not disturb our present peace. Perhaps tomorrow will bring new understanding, new perspectives on old stories. Perhaps we'll see patterns we hadn't noticed before, or connections that had remained hidden. Or perhaps we'll simply appreciate the fascinating complexity of human nature, unchanged across the centuries. The story of Henry VIII reminds us that power and passion can reshape worlds, but also that no amount of worldly power can guarantee happiness, security, or the legacy we hope to leave. Even kings are, in the end, subject to forces beyond their control. Sleep well, knowing that however complicated our own lives may seem, we navigate them in a world where personal conscience is valued, where power is checked, and where the lessons learned from figures like Henry VIII have helped shape systems designed to prevent such absolute authority. Let the distant past recede. Let the Tudor drama fade. Let the music carry you gently into peaceful rest.